Hello everyone, thank you for joining us in this edition of The Insight. I am Babyle Jonathan. Pope Francis authorizes the blessing of same-sex couples, but the church in Cameroon says no. The church in Cameroon says it is against the teachings of the church. It is against natural law. We are looking at this in this edition of The Insight. Meet our guest in some few seconds. Our guest today is His Grace, Dr. Andrew Kia. He is the Archbishop of Bamenda, the President of the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon. His Grace, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
A lot has been said. There have been a lot of interpretations, analysis about the issue of blessing same-sex couples. I want us to establish the facts.
We have to really establish the facts, as you say. The Pope did not say anything. The document we're talking about was signed by Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who is the prefect for the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, with the approval of the Pope. And in that document, Cardinal Fernandez stated very, very clearly, with the approval of the Holy Father, that the teaching about the church on marriage as a sacrament given to a man and a woman has not changed. But then he went further to say that priests were permitted to give blessings to homosexual couples or couples in irregular situations. And it is there that we, the bishops of Cameroon, and like you see other bishops of Africa and other places in the world, have a problem. Because that insinuation to give blessings to homosexual couples, this is where the nuance is. And that's where we say we cannot do it. And actually the bishops of Cameroon have forbidden any of such blessings in the Catholic Church in Cameroon.
What is the meaning of blessing in this context?
Blessing is to sanctify, is to approve and to call on God's benediction. This is what blessing is. Because when a bishop or a priest gives a blessing, he as an individual has no power to give blessing. He raises his hand and he blesses in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. It's an invocation of God's goodness, an invocation of God's sanctification, sanctifying grace upon what you are blessing. So we don't give blessings on our own. We give blessings in the name of God. And therefore, you cannot give a blessing to what God does not approve. And that's why we say that when you are giving a blessing, you are calling on God to sanctify, to make holy. You are giving your approval. And that is why, because blessing itself, pene dicere, to speak well. This is what blessing is. There are two Latin words combined. You bless is to speak well, literally, which means you call on God's presence and sanctification on what you bless.
Where is the line, if there is any, between the blessing that we are talking about here, approved by the Pope, and the everyday blessing of individuals by priest?
There is no line. We can bless anybody and everybody. And I don't know how many homosexuals I have blessed. But when you talk about blessing homosexual couples, this is where the nuance is. If two men present themselves to me as a couple, I cannot bless them. If individual men come to me for blessing, or a group of men come to me for blessing, I can bless anybody. But if two men present themselves as a couple, this is where we are arguing. I cannot bless them. I'm blessing them to do what? What am I sanctifying? What am I speaking well of? I'm calling on God's sanctifying grace to come upon what? This is where we have a problem.
Is the blessing of homosexual couples therefore equal to celebrating marriage, a wedding?
No, it is not equal to celebrating marriage or a wedding. but it is a form of approval of the couple. And we refuse, we cannot approve such couples.
By accepting the blessing of same-sex couples, has the Pope, has the Church accepted homosexuality?
Well, this is a question you should ask Cardinal Fernandez when you meet him. The document gives the impression that the Church does not accept. But at the same time, you have to interpret what does blessing mean. And that is why we say that there is confusion, and we follow the moral theological principle which says that in doubt don't act, and in act don't doubt.
Can you therefore help us, His Grace, to have the right interpretation of what is said? Because there have been multiple interpretations, converging and divergent interpretations.
I must tell you openly and honestly that this discussion about homosexual couples and blessing and even marriage took place in the Synod, where I was present. I've been a member of the Council of the Synod in Vatican now for 5 years. So from the very conception of the Synod, I was there. And we had discussions like this. Some continents made such suggestions. But during the Synod, there were lots of arguments on this, and we said, no, we cannot do it. So it is important for you to understand the background. We said, no, it cannot be done, because it will give the impression that the Church is legitimizing homosexual acts and homosexual unions. So, if you look at the final document of the Synod, what we call the synthesis of the first part of Synod, the word LGBTQ does not appear there. But it doesn't appear because it was removed. When the first draft was presented to the Synod, we argued strongly that this is giving a wrong impression of the Church doctrine, and it was removed. So for this document to come after that is a very great confusion. And I think it is not a matter of giving the impression. There are cultures which seem to accept that they can tolerate this in their societies. There are other cultures which cannot even tolerate it. And that is where we find ourselves.
And those cultures are mostly Western cultures?
Western cultures. There are many churches in Europe that say that we are just burying our head in the sand, that things are going on whether we accept or not. Yeah, the fact that we condemn adultery doesn't mean that adultery is not going on. But with the church's teaching is clear. The fact that we say don't fornicate does not mean that fornication is not going on. But you cannot come now and say because fornication is going on, baptize fornication. So what is the church standing for? The church remains the moral voice of society, and the teaching of the church is clear. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, that is why a man leaves his father and leaves his father and mother and joins his wife, and the two become one flesh. So man and man are joining how? I don't know how it is done, so can anybody enlighten me? So this is where we are. The teaching of the church is clear. Homosexual acts are disordered because they are against the natural law. Male and female, he made them. From the book of Genesis right up to Matthew, where Jesus quoted Genesis, male and female, he made them. And this is what the church has taught all down the 2,000 years that we know.
You already started answering my next question. I was going to ask what explains what has been qualified as the radical position of the church, not only in Cameroon, in Nigeria, across Africa, the radical position of the church against a decision or something coming from the Vatican.
If you have been following the trends, at the end of October, after the Synod, I gave an interview with the National Catholic Reporter, and I said there that in Africa, marriage is understood as a union between a man and a woman. And anything short of this is witchcraft. Because Africa does not, in your dialect, you cannot explain it. And the only way your mother or your grandmother in the village can understand this or can explain it is that it's an abomination and it is witchcraft. So that is why we say that one of our strongest points, and I must repeat it here for your audience, is that this thing of homosexuality or gay marriages and lesbians is an ideology. It's an ideology from the West, supported by certain Western governments and organizations, which they want to impose it on Africa. We are tired of Western impositions. And that is why, if you are 2,000 years old as a church, we are only 120 years old as a church in Africa. Just leave us grow at our pace. Don't impose things on us, especially things that contradict our culture. I think this is the strong point for us. This is an ideology imported by certain Western governments and supported by certain organizations of the West. They should leave Africa alone. Let us take our own decisions and grow at our pace.
This is something that has been under the table for a long time. The pressure keeps increasing, and the question here is, why the increasing pressure on the Catholic Church?
Because if you look through all the organizations, the Catholic Church is the only moral body that has a command around the world. If the Holy Father says something, 1.3 billion Catholics will listen. And that is why the only opposition that you really have to moral issues in this world comes from the Catholic Church. And those who have these ideologies and want to promote them, the only way to do it is to break the church. But the church belongs to Christ. If human beings could break it, they would have broken it more than 2,000 years ago. The church has existed and will still stand. So it's unfortunate that the ideologies of this world think that they can penetrate the church and try to shake the fabric of the church. It cannot be shaken because it's standing on Christ. Christ is the rock on which the church is built. So storms will come and pass. This one too will pass like the rest. The church will remain.
His Grace, I listened to a priest answering some questions on this from journalists, and he said that he will have difficulties. He didn't say that he will not do it. He said he will have difficulties in blessing same-sex couples. Does that mean there is still a margin for this to happen?
In Cameroonian church, there is no margin. The bishops have not only given an opinion, they have legislated that it should not be done. So any priest who does it will face canonical penalties.
Canonical penalties?
Sanctions, yeah.
Like?
Suspension. I'll suspend you from ministry if I hear that you bless the marriage. It's as strong as that.
Right. Now, with this information going viral on social media and everywhere and so on, what is the reaction of the Christians? I listened to a colleague of mine who said on television that he's resigning from the Catholic Church. What are you getting from the Christians, from the
when I spoke in church on Christmas Day and I said that this should not happen, there was an explosion of applause. So our Christians are very, very consoled by the stand of the bishops. And I think that we didn't just